All right, now we'll get started. Thank you all for joining us tonight for the 2024 Federation of Friends meeting. As we always thank you all for all the support you give to the parks and the staff and the agency as a whole. We really couldn't do it without you, and we value all your time and energy and dedication to supporting the parks in such a valuable way. So, I want to first say a big apology. Jay Cole, our executive director, is not going to be able to join us tonight. She had a last minute change in her family schedule, so she's going to miss the meeting tonight. But we've got both of our deputies, Sarah Baldwin and Amy Bosper, on the line, as well as a variety of other staff, many of whom you all, I'm sure, recognize from various parks and parts of the agency. Um, our agenda tonight will start with everyone's favorite topic, the budget. Mike Peter will talk to us about that. Then we'll talk about the equity study report, and we'll hear a little bit from some of our super active advocates. And hopefully at the end, we'll have a quick few minutes for everybody to do kind of an around the room and share some stories from each of your friends groups and other groups if you'd like to share at the end. So we'll try to get a lot in a short time. So thank you for your patience and your participation and listening and engaging with us in all these important topics. So with that, I will hand it over to Mike Peter and we'll start talking about the budget.
One second here. I am just getting this going. So I want to thank everyone for, again, all of what everyone has done in terms of advocacy, in terms of really understanding what it takes as far as pulling together all of the resources for our entire park authority here. And as you know, we had some very particular focus areas this year. We focused primarily on maintenance. And with that, we actually did very, very well ultimately in what came out in the county executive's proposed budget. So with that, I think, okay, good, you can see it now. So with that, we thought we would go through a little bit of really what made the case as far as the focus on our maintenance needs throughout the park authority. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's in the proposed budget and what the next steps look like. So with that, this just gives you a sense, and I believe we've shown different versions of this before. When we look at our overall budget over the years, when we combine our general fund operating budget with also the county construction fund, that's really what it is that we can spend each year. So you see along the bottom, you see that it's relatively flat. You see it's relatively flat with general fund operating. You also see that the personnel certainly goes up, and it goes up though essentially until these last couple of years with the COLA increases or the MRA increases. But overall, the point is that we have been expanding our system over the past decade and more, but up until recently, really, those funds to maintain the system as a whole have been relatively flat. So you can see here, for instance, when we talk about park operations, you can see what our original budget was for park operations this past year. That's really where we have most of our focus for all of our maintenance expenses. We had salary budget of $10.5 million, but we spent $8.1 million. Now, that doesn't mean that we didn't have the need to be able to hire more staff. What we had to do was make sure that we could fund that overage that we had to spend in the general fund operating side of things. So that becomes about a $2.1 million problem that we have run into each year to make sure that we can effectively maintain all of the park properties throughout the system without the budget to be able to do that. So again, you can see here, just to make the point, it's 10.5 million that we had budgeted. We spent $8.1 million, and we really moved that difference there down into the operating side of things, so we could cover all of the expenses that we incurred in this past year, and that's pretty indicative of each year before that. Just to give you a sense, you see that our total acreage between FY09 and FY24 increased by over 1,000 acres. That's 4.6% added into our system. 25 trail miles, 35 athletic courts, picnic shelters. You can see everything increased, yet our staffing actually decreased. And with that, that told the story enough that the Board of Supervisors and our county executive, Brian Hill, really focused on how could we try to solve this issue from a budgetary standpoint. Now, what we see in the county executive's proposed budget certainly helps us to deal with the immediate needs, and it's a step in the right direction. And there'll be many, many more steps that need to be taken. You can see here, we ask for capital support each time we go through the budget cycle, each time we go through the carryover, the third quarter cycle. And these that you see in front of us, we just got rid of this 1979 bulldozer. We still very much use this 1990 dump bed truck. This is used throughout our system. And you can see there's a boiler that looks like something out of Victorian times that we replaced at one of our rec centers here. So just we did a lot of comparison here, a lot of benchmarking to see how do we stand up to both our surrounding jurisdictions and similar jurisdictions. Fairfax County does compare quite a bit to Mecklenburg County down in North Carolina, and you can see that roughly the number of acres is not really dissimilar. The population is similar, but then you start to see that Fairfax County, we have 158 maintenance and operations staff. They have 202 for a slightly smaller system and certainly fewer parts. We have a park operating and personnel expense budget of almost $19 million overall. They have $25 million. And you can see how that ends up comparing in terms of the maintenance investment when we compare ourselves to Mecklenburg County. And then you can also see when we're taking a look at our surrounding jurisdictions that it's a very stark story as well. When we're talking about our park operating expense per acre at $799, Arlington's at $3,515, and you can see with our other surrounding jurisdictions that we're firmly in a place where we're showing that we are not investing as much as those jurisdictions. So what did this mean as far as going through this process with the board and with also the Park Authority board and going through the different discussions with the county executive and staff across the street from us? You can see then $2.1 million. We talked about that just a moment ago, that's what we were having to hold in personnel so we could then move it to non-personnel to pay for these different needs that we had. So we identified, when we say projected need, that's really what we spend on an average basis. So we had budgeted, for instance, in forestry, that's just for the high-risk trees, $383,000. But especially when we see things like the rains we just had and so much change with our maturing oak trees that are coming dislodged from the ground all over our system. The difference there, $890,000. Athletic field mowing, park open space mowing, court maintenance, trail maintenance, all of these things, we show that we were meeting these needs, but we were meeting these needs at the expense of not being able to hire maintenance personnel. So that really became the core of how we talked about this internally and what the county executive and members of the Board of Supervisors really focused in on. So we were able to make the point that our resources, our woefully insufficient to be able to address the growth in our system. We've had years of stagnant and decreased budgets. We've continued to absorb, and we continue also to absorb even more significant requirements and initiatives without the operating budget impact. We've had increased support for tournaments at Patriot Park North, for instance, forestry operations, recycling. And this was a significant step in the right direction, that we were able to identify that $2.1 million. That helps to close a gap. That doesn't necessarily help us to be able to do more, although it frees up personnel dollars in this next fiscal year, if this budget is passed, for us to be able to better continue to increase our staffing at our parks and our managed facilities. So we had some additional budget requests. We're very happy to say that, certainly throughout the process, and we know that we had a lot of impact and a lot of discussion from members of this group as we had to go through this 7% general fund reduction exercise. We had a target of $2.4 million. And as you'll remember, we had to focus on things that could be potentially reduced. And after consideration, the county executive did not take any of those reductions. And again, in fact, elected to propose investing even more in the Park Authority maintenance. So that was definitely a positive and significant step in the right direction for us. We also had this additional budget guidance. Members of our Park Authority board did spend a good portion of the fall discussing budget issues and preparation before the FY25 plan came out. So there were no surprises. There were good and thoughtful discussions about where that investment could be. The county executive was directed by the Board of Supervisors to make FCPA operationally whole in future budgets for forestry and bamboo mitigation. And also we are continuing, this is not reflected in this year's proposed budget, but we're continuing to work with the police department to initiate a review of options to continue to see if a park ranger program or some other presence of law enforcement with our park system would work best with what already exists in Fairfax County. So we have all of these wonderful things that we've been talking about here. And, with that, we can see that we had a CPI request that certainly was $658,000. And what the Department of Management and Budget really focused on, it's not necessarily that this is just a pittance when we see $69,580. This is the portion of our contract increases that were directly attributable to labor. So that's what they were really able to focus on and hang their hats on to make sure that we could have a similar increase in our personnel-driven contracts that would also be reflected in what the county executive is proposing for baseline personnel increases. We did ask for and we received the full year of funding for our Mobile Nature Center. And I know we're going to be talking about that. And a lot of people in this group have been big supporters of that. We're very excited to roll that out very soon. Bamboo removal, yes, that's $400,000 that is now in our ongoing budget. And we do also still have the position that was authorized by the county board in the last budget cycle to be able to manage our bamboo mitigation. Now, zero waste, trash removal, and recycling, we've talked a lot about that, and this $4 million number almost is a number for us to be able to meet the needs throughout all of our area all of our different areas throughout our system to be able to meet those requirements of zero waste, trash removal, and recycling. And the county executive is proposing a pilot or a phase 1 project with 2 of our areas. So just because there's a difference between that, it's really a step to make sure that we have our systems in place, and we have agreed that we will continue to work together to grow with that. We've already talked about our contract funding for forestry. We've talked about our service restoration, which is the other part of that $2.1 million. We also received some fantastic support to make sure that we are able to maintain our girls softball tournament fields at Wakefield in the best shape possible to be able to hold world-class tournaments there. We did also receive additional funds for our Diamond Field maintenance, and also as a result of proposed increases in the athletic services fee, $932,000 to help us move towards fully funding our synthetic turf replacement program. So all of these are steps in the right direction. One of the areas that we will continue to work very closely with our colleagues in the Department of Management and Budget on is that OBI funding area. You see that we requested almost $1.8 million, and that is for the impact of us adding new properties or adjusting to new uses, large wholesale changes to the uses of different properties. Embedded in that was our request for full-time staffing for the Woodlands Education and Stewardship Center, as well as staffing for Laurel Hill Central Green. And we did not have anything in the proposed budget from the county executive in that area. We will continue to develop that and continue to work closely with our colleagues. So when we do have something new coming online, we'll continue to make the case for it. But overall, you can see that there are some significant adjustments to our budget that have been proposed here, more than $4 million. Talked a little bit about zero waste trash and recycling. That's that phase one. So we won't see messes like that in our parks. Talked about forestry funding, of course, something I know very important to the participants in this call. And also we have some energy projects that have been funded. And these are really more on a project by project basis. So you can see that we have funded our conversion, our phase two conversion to, from gas powered equipment to electric equipment, continued support for our invasive management area program, Watch the Green Grow program, and our water chestnut mitigation program. So all of those projects are also in the base to be funded in this next fiscal year as well. So this is absolutely amazing. When Jay came, she set a goal for us to really focus on what we could do each year in terms of trying to raise the profile for the Park Authority and make sure that there could be focus areas for this amazing group and also for our Park Authority board and also responding to the needs of the different districts. And you can see that in FY 23-24 and then in the 25 proposed budget, if that goes forward, that's $3.1 million in support that is directly attributable to this sort of focus and this sort of advocacy. $4.5 million in the General County Construction Fund, and almost $13 million in third quarter carryover one-time funds. So we are over $20 million as a direct result of all of the advocacy and the work that our partners have done to make sure that the board and that the community understands what the challenges are in front of the Park Authority. And this is just a different way to see it. And I really like to see this because you can see from FY11 on up, you can see how it was relatively stable. And then you start to see that, yeah, there were a few reductions in things in here. You can see those little red lines. In fact, we had one reduction in 25. It was not a budget reduction. It was moving our RecPac program from the Park Authority over to NCS. But otherwise, you see us on this fantastic loop going upwards because of this investment and because of the advocacy that you all have put out there to make sure that the messages are heard of all of our different friends groups. So with that, Allison, I don't know if we're stopping for questions now or later, but I will turn it back over to you.
I think we can take a few questions right now, but I would ask that they be just a couple for right now. And if we if we can give it a few minutes and then move on to the equity slides if that works. Whitney has her hand raised.
Yeah, I just have to keep re-educating myself every year because budget is not my first language. Can you explain again how the IMA budget is determined and that specific amount that you pointed at in one of your last slides? If that's, some funding that's an increase, or is it continuous, like continuing from previous? And is it in the real budget, or is it something that comes later?
Thank you for that question. So the IMA budget is funded through the investment in the EIP, or the energy program funds that are sort of separately allocated by the county, but that is a continuing budget. That is not a decrease. We are continued at the same level that we were last year. There was an increase last year into that program, and it just happens to not be necessarily in the general fund. It's in a fund where if we don't spend all of it in one fiscal year, it can carry over, but we have that same baseline budget. In addition to that, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So a follow-up question is that, I remember when you were between, hadn't yet hired Brian Capote, I think his name is, and the budget ran out for Gloria Medina's role. And when I was trying to reach her in like November and December at the height of all the things that we were doing for tree rescues, and I just wanted to prove, did you run out of money? So I just want to find that out.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Sure, I can take that one. Sarah Baldwin, Deputy Director. Actually, it is related to the status of her position. So Gloria was not a full-time merit position. She was what we call a E-status position, which is a benefit eligible position. And those individuals can only work 1,560 hours a year. And I believe she hit that hour limit, and so therefore she had to take off the rest of the calendar year. So it was not related to available funding. It was related specifically to the mandate related to her hours and those types of positions. But I believe we've hired a new IMA coordinator merit position. Laura, I don't know if you want to provide a quick update on that.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I'm at my son's soccer game as well, so just got into the car, but it's very nice to see you all this evening. Yes, I'm very happy to announce that Gloria Medina is actually our new IMA coordinator. So she is in a full-time merit position, and Brian is serving as in a support role right now. So with the budget item for the bamboo program, that helps to really complete our, or really helps to really create this series for our invasive management program as well. So they'll be all working in coordination with one another to support bamboo removal as well as to assist with the IMA program. So we're very happy for Gloria, and she's already stepping in and doing a great job.
Thanks.
Wonderful. All right, we'll take one more question, and then before we go on to the equity slides, Susan.
Hi, I assume that's Susan Nee.
Yes.
Thank you for doing this. I heard two things that I was not familiar with, so I'm hoping you could provide a brief explanation. You said they're looking at staffing for Laurel Hill Central Green, and I'm kind of confused about what that would be since there's no housing there. And then also, I've never heard of the Watch the Green Grow program. So what are those two things?
Mike, you want me to take Laurel Hill?
Yeah, you can take
Sure.
Laurel Hill. Yeah, please.
Sure. So it would be staff that would supplement the Area 4 crews and that are focused on Laurel Hill. So they would work out of the Area 4 shop. But as we continue to develop Laurel Hill, especially the Central Green, the management of that area, the surrounding trails, all the property that we have at Laurel Hill is really just overwhelming our Area 4 maintenance crew. And so especially with the addition of the Central.
She froze up.
Uh-oh.
Yes. So she's talking about the size of Central Green being so big that we are
Within
trying to
area
see if we
4.
can.
And Mike spoke about that. Yeah. So that was one of the things I think Mike spoke about. Operational budget impacts was one of the items that was not funded. Obviously, we did very well in terms of the support from the county. But with the new Stewardship Education Center coming on board, the staff for that facility was not funded, or the operational costs. And so that will be a focus of ours moving forward. And
I'd be happy to respond to the Watch the Green Grow program. That is a program, an outreach and education program that's focused on coordinating with homeowners associations, private groups, schools, and helping to educate them on a variety of efforts that they can do at home, whether it's implementing dark sky compliant lighting, to reducing the amount of fertilizer that they're putting on their property, to increasing native plantings on their properties as well. And it's a real kind of a opportunity for everybody to work together and continue to educate folks on the variety of environmental stewardship activities that they can do to support a lot of the work that we're doing at the Park Authority as well.
All right. Thank you for those great questions. If we have time at the end, we'll circle back and give people more time to ask. But at this point, we'll move on to the equities presentation, and I'll kick it over to Sarah.
good evening again, everyone. I'm Sarah Baldwin. For those of you who haven't met, I'm one of the deputy directors with the Park Authority. I oversee operations and administration, and I have the pleasure this evening of presenting a long-awaited report that we partnered with HR&A consultants to review the revenue and operating fund of the Park Authority. Next slide. For those of you who may not be familiar with HR&A, they are a very well-known consultant group in the field. They've done work in Fairfax County in the past related to the Springfield Mall, related to Tyson's, and really around the country. And we wanted a consultant that was not only focused on parks and recreation, but had a larger focus on economics, and HR&A brought that skill set to this work. Next slide. And I know that I'm speaking to the choir here, but this is just a reminder. And when we presented this to the Board of Supervisors, we really wanted to recognize and remind everyone of the benefits of parks and recreation and why we want an equitable park system. We know, access to quality recreation and parks improve health. They improve safety of the community, they improve property values. And so again, this was just a message that we delivered to the Board of Supervisors as a reminder of how important parks and recreation are and how we should ensure that everyone has access to these benefits moving forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so just as a little bit of background, we started on this work about a year and a half ago, and one of the slides that we shared with the Board of Supervisors when we first introduced this problem or issue was really looking at the representation of individuals in our programs and at our facilities. And when you look at the population of Fairfax County, it's extremely diverse. We also compared that to the enrollment in our classes, camps, rec centers, and individuals that play golf. And when you looked at that, we found that the individuals that were participating in our programs and services did not represent the community that we serve. And frankly, mostly because many of the services that we provide are unaffordable for the majority of the community. However, when you look at our Rec Pack program, which is supported by the Park General Fund, you see a greater breakdown and more reflective of the Fairfax County population. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the RECPAC program, the RECPAC program is funded by the general fund, and there's a sliding fee scale for individuals that are participating in that program. So people pay based on their income for the weekly fee. Next slide. So when we looked at different models and how park and recreation agencies are operating around the country, we found that many park and recreation agencies focus their cost recovery based on community benefit. So if you think about community benefit at the top of the pyramid, where people are paying probably 100% or more of the cost of the service, things like personal training would come to mind. However, when you look at other areas like learn to swim classes or camps, there's generally less of a cost recovery target, and so fees are lower for the community because of that community benefit when we look at safety and health and improvements to the overall community. In contrast to the benchmarks that we looked at nationwide, the Park Authority is required to cover all of the expenses in the Park Revenue Fund. This includes direct expenses and indirect expenses, which drives up the fees that we're charging the community. Next slide, please. So this slide further illustrates the difference. If you look at the Park Authority and the fees that we're charging, we are required to recoup all fees associated with programs and operations within the Revenue Fund. So if you look at other park and recreation agencies, they're typically required to cover the cost of the supplies, say for camp, maybe the camp counselors, where in the Park Authority, we are required to cover all costs associated with delivering that program, including the utilities for the building, all of the administrative staff that work in that building, and all costs that go into the operation of our rec centers or other facilities. Next slide. When you compare FCPA to the national average, you see that the national average for cost recovery is about 25%. When you look at the Park Authority, we're nearly 60%, well above that national average, which again is driving up our dependence on fees and charges to sustain our operations. Next slide. So in working with HRNA, they recommended implementing a multi-pronged approach to help address the inequity in access to FCPA facilities and programs. They recommend reducing some fees for everyone by revising the cost recovery targets to align more closely with community benefits. And they also recommended introducing a supplementary subsidy to make programs more accessible to those residents who can least afford them. And I'll talk further about that in future slides. And then additionally, we know if we move to a sliding fee program, if we reduce our fees, there will be an administrative cost that goes along with that. We know the process that we have used for some pilots that we've done, and we know outreach to the community is a significant part of the work that we need to do to make sure the residents of Fairfax County know the services that we offer, know the process to access those services, and then can access them. And I'll talk a little bit further more about the administrative fees later on in the presentation. Next slide. So if FCPA were to reach that national cost recovery average of 25%, we're estimating it would cost $32.4 million. And looking at what's realistic in terms of what we can move forward, we are recommending kind of a modified approach to this cost recovery target, which we feel is more feasible in reaching our equity goals. Next slide. So HRNA recommends that FCPA move forward with a multi-tiered system of program cost recovery based on community benefit, which means that we would lower the cost for some of our programs. So things like rec centers may have a target of 50 to 100% cost recovery. Things like learn to swim classes, which is really a health safety program, their cost recovery targets may be closer to 20 or 30%. When you look at some of the preschools that we offer, again, essential to the development of children, again, we would look for a cost recovery closer to 20 or 30%, really more aligning with our RECPAC program. Next slide. An initial step in the pyramid would be a modified implementation of the cost recovery approach. So we're recommending that we would implement a pyramid and that we would work with the community to define where programs and facilities fall in that program. We know things like golf instruction, golf classes, personal training, individual type programs, cost recovery should be 100% or more. However, programs like summer camps, which is essential to many working families in Fairfax County, maybe the cost recovery target would be a little bit lower. Through the public engagement that we'll do over the next several months, we'll work with the community to identify where programs and services should fall in that pyramid. Next slide. HRNA also recommends that we implement a subsidy type program through a sliding fee scale. And so I talked a little bit earlier about the sliding fee scale program that we have right now for RECPAC. So individuals pay based on their income. So individuals at the top of the scale, if they're making over a certain amount of money, would pay the top fee for the program, while individuals or families making less money would pay less for those programs and services. Additionally, we want to make sure that everyone has access to park and recreation services. And so through the benchmarking that HRNA did, they found that many agencies around the country were offering a voucher program in addition to sliding fee scales or fee reductions. So families most in need could access a voucher. It could be a couple of $100s a year where they could pay for things that were at the top of the scale, which may be campground or a shelter rental or personal training, that sort of thing. But that voucher would be given to the families with the lowest incomes in Fairfax County. Next slide, please. So when we look at implementation of the sliding fee scale, we are estimating the cost to implement a sliding fee scale for many of the programs that we've discussed would cost about $7 million. And of course, as we define where things fall in that pyramid, that number may change, go up or down. And of course, based on our needs, that number may go up and down in our expenses. But at this point, we're estimating implementation of a sliding fee scale similar to what we have for our RECPAC program, similar to what's offered for SAC, which is the before and after school program offered by NCS, would cost about $7 million. Next slide. And again, I mentioned the voucher program a little bit earlier. When we looked around the country, and even in Fairfax County, Reston Community Center offers a voucher program for families living in Reston with lower incomes. And we estimate a voucher program initially would cost about $3 million. Next slide, please. And then finally, one of the areas that I addressed briefly in one of the previous slides was related to the administrative costs. So we know to implement a sliding fee scale and a voucher program, there will definitely need to be change to our registration systems. We will need additional staff to do that outreach, and we'll need to do some work to figure out how we make sure that our administrative processes are very accessible to the community, easy for people to use, so that we can serve the greatest number of people possible. We also recognize that this number could go down. So 7.2 is kind of on the high end, and we recognize that's a big number. However, we have had discussions with the county about having a central clearinghouse. There would be another agency potentially in the county that would identify where people fall in the pyramid for services within Fairfax County. And so it would be another organization that would be doing that verification, and not something that the Park Authority would be required to do. And that would take some of the costs of the administrative expenses off of us. Next slide. So in total, when you look at the recommendations that we're making, the community benefit pyramid, which would really look at lowering all costs for most of our programs for all residents in Fairfax County, would cost about $9.4 million. A sliding fee scale would cost about $7 million, the voucher program $3 million, and then the administrative and outreach expenses $7.2, for a total of $26.6 million. Next slide. So going back to where we are, we anticipate that we will be working hand in hand with the Park Authority Board and the Board of Supervisors to develop a realistic implementation plan over the next several years. We know that we're not going to get $26.6 million in a budget anytime soon, but our hope is, based on the community input that we receive over the next several months, as well as our work with the Department of Management Budget and the Board of Supervisors, we would develop an implementation plan that would kind of take this $26.6 million need and break it up over several years. And we would work to identify what programs or what services we would implement first with the greatest benefit to the community. Additionally, HRNA did some work for us in looking at other jurisdictions, because we know $26.6 million isn't going to drop from the sky, and there may need to be some alternative funding sources that are sought to fund this need. And so if you look at Colorado, they're funding some of their park needs through a dedicated sales tax revenue. In Washington and Virginia Beach, there's a dedicated tax to Parks and Recreation, and again in Oregon. So many of the localities around the country have different mechanisms for funding, and as we continue to work with DMB, we will investigate all the different types of funding sources that are used by localities around the country to fund their park and recreation system and their equity work. Next slide. So ultimately, in summary, our goal is to expand access to the benefits of public recreation to all Fairfax County households, to ensure that fees are no longer a barrier to participation to Fairfax County's lowest income households, and that we align with national park and recreation best practice for cost recovery targets. And I think that might be, and then finally, we wanted to mention that this isn't the only thing the Park Authority is working on in terms of equity, although it is a major focus of ours now. There are several different initiatives that we are working on to advance equity throughout the system. So we will continue our work on our equity action plan, which is available online on the One Fairfax site. We will continue to work with the Board of Supervisors on that implementation plan. And when we met with the Board of Supervisors, we wanted to reiterate to them, this is not a budget request. This is the start of a conversation about how we implement and provide greater access to all Fairfax County residents. The public outreach that I mentioned earlier is ongoing. We have survey that's online. I'm sure many of you have already received it, and I've seen some of the friends groups actually send it out through your newsletters, which we appreciate. We've gotten great participation so far in that survey. Additionally, we have staff that are going out to community meetings, and especially community meetings and events where there are individuals that would not typically participate in our programs. So we've partnered with NCS to identify those communities that are not being served by the Park Authority's programs and services now, and are requesting their feedback on the survey as well. And next slide. I think that's it. Is that it? Okay, great.
Good.
And that's it for me.
That in a nutshell.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sure.
I think we do have time for a few questions on the equity study, if anybody has a couple questions to ask before we move on to the next piece. It's a lot of information. I know a lot
Allison,
of you.
I may Allison Tim, I may just make a quick observation. If there are administration costs that are directly handled by another department in the county, nevertheless, we would anticipate that we would be allocated or have to pick those up as indirect or allocated costs from the county, unless they're otherwise covered by county funding. So just a quick observation.
All right.
I just had a quick question. Just, it sounds really complicated, but is it actually complicated or easy to go to a sliding fee? You know, like if so-and-so, such and such a family, you know, qualifies for, I think what you're saying is if such and such a family qualifies for free and reduced lunch, their kid, then that person is a shoo-in for certain, you know, sliding scale or voucher opportunities. It does sound like really complex.
It is. So it's a little bit more complex than it is just with the Rec Pack program, right? So you all have seen the Partakes catalog. There are thousands of programs literally that are offered every year. So there would be some work that we would need to do to figure out where those programs fall in the sliding fee scale. But ultimately what you said is correct. Individuals that are making the least amount of money in Fairfax County would pay the least amount for our programs and services. Those making the most would pay the most. And because we have so many programs and services that we offer, we would need to determine an approach for how we implement the sliding fee scale for all of those different programs. Amy, did you have a question?
Yep.
I think you're muted. Amy, I think, yeah.
Keeps me from bursting in when I shouldn't. The apples and oranges thing, I want to make sure I'm understanding the 2.1 million shortfall in personnel. That's on top of the amount that you need for the equity.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So there will be many opportunities for input. As I mentioned, we're going to community meetings, hosting online survey. And so if any of the friends groups would like a meeting with us to go over this in more detail, we know it's a lot of information that's kind of complicated. So we're happy to meet with folks individually and go over the approach that we're recommending and how it would be implemented.
I do have one more question. What are the kinds of questions you've gotten so far from the other side of the street, so to speak? What are the kinds of questions they're asking, so that helps me understand where their thinking is going?
Kyle, do you remember some of the questions they were asking? I know there was a lot of conversation.
Most of the, I don't want to say the word concern, that's not really the right word. Most of the discussion was around the funding piece of this. There wasn't a lot of questions or confusion or pushback around what we were proposing. But it's a big ask monetarily, and it's going to have to be kind of broken off in small chunks over some number of years. So, I mean, the discussion questions are really around how is that kind of funding mechanism going to work, and how long and how many dollars kind of each year. There's nobody on the board of supervisors pushed back in terms of they didn't understand what we were proposing or had issues with any of kind of the recommendations from HRNA. It's a big dollar ask, so it's going to take some time and some thinking about how this rolls out. And we can't do this all, as Jay likes to say every time anyone talks to her about it, is we couldn't do this all in 1 year if they gave us $25 million tomorrow anyway. There's a lot of systems that have to be put into place, and it's going to take some time to do that. I don't know if that answers your question directly, but there really, at least from my recollection, there really weren't any questions coming from the board in terms of trying to get a better handle on what it is we were proposing.
Right, thank you.
Let's see, it looks like somebody just put something in the chat. Thank you, Sarah, Kyle, and all good information. Any follow-up outreach efforts planned? Meetings, briefings, newsletters?
Follow up for what?
I think that outreach efforts, maybe Amy wanna?
Yes, we're continuing our outreach efforts through the next several months, and then pulling together the comments and questions that we have. So to get a draft report out in the fall. So we've got meeting schedules. I've got Ben is on the line as well. We have meetings scheduled across the county, and we're piggyback on the other events that the county is holding as well. I know, Ben, you can jump in, but we had a team at the Black History Month at the Government Center, but we're at South County, we're at Sully, we're across the county at any meeting that's happening. Ben?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll just add a little bit to it. So first of all, thank you to all of our friends. I really appreciate your help in getting out the survey that we've been putting out. We have more than 1,700 responses to that survey right now, and that is a phenomenal response. As Amy mentioned, we are partnering with Neighborhood and Community Services to connect with many of the communities that are not necessarily connected with parks, communities that are hard to reach, perhaps that are underrepresented in a lot of programs throughout the county. And we have been working with them very, very closely. We have a calendar that we've been following of 19 community meetings that we've been participating at. 12 of them are complete. We have 7 more coming up and a few yet to be determined if we could squeeze them in before the end of the survey. But they have been going very well. We've been speaking to a lot of folks in a variety of languages from a variety of backgrounds, houses of worship, community service providers, and other partners as part of what NCS calls the Opportunity Neighborhoods, for those of you that might be familiar with that program. But it's been a very successful initiative.
All right, any other questions? And we're always available for more questions on this. We know like we said, it's a lot of information to kind of digest. So if, in the coming days, if you have questions going forward, feel free to reach out to us as well. Next, we are going to ask a couple of our advocates to kind of talk to us as a group about their recent efforts and successes over the last couple of years that have helped us have the success that we have had this year in the budget scenarios that are being proposed. So we're very excited about that and thank them all and all of you for your support in that effort. So I'm first going to ask Lydia Lawrence to talk to us for a few minutes.
Thank you, Allison, and hello, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here. I am the chair of the Fairfax Parks Coalition, and we are a small group of some friends groups. Shout out to my friends, people who are here, as well as environmental organizations and advocates who care very, very much for their parks. We started in winter of 2021 on the heels of Justice Park trying to be taken to be turned to a parking lot for a school. And it made us realize that our park system needs a lot more advocates speaking up for them and speaking up for better funding for them. One of the greatest successes we've had in advocacy is evaluating the budget that has been submitted, evaluating our priorities, developing language around those priorities. And then we've done multiple rounds talking to each supervisor. We talk to each supervisor one-to-one meetings in town halls, as well as in the budget hearings, which are April 16th to 18th this year. And then we go back and talk to them a second time and really push them to fund our priorities. That's part of the reason we got the Mobile Nature Center. We've gotten that extra IMA funding position for bamboo removal, as well as additional forestry funding. Basically, we started influencing, along with many other friends groups, the budgets in FY23 and 24. And we're so thankful to see all our work come to fruition in FY25. But I do believe this gives us a wonderful opportunity to not just say, thank you for really seeing the needs of the Park Authority so we don't have to fight you tooth and nail to fund them, but also these are the needs we continue to see. I know all of us can identify with the IMA problem and how there's a backlog of volunteers and we need more support in our Park Authority system for IMA, and not seeing as many park employees across our parks and watching that number decrease steadily over the years. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity to, as we thank our supervisors for funding these initiatives, to also push them to add budget guidance like they did last year, to really focus on these problem areas and really evaluate how we can also fund the equity study. So I'm going to put a shameless plug in the chat because there was a question on there if there's any outreach events planned. And Fairfax Parks Coalition has a comment writing party planned specifically on the equity study on March 18th. And that's the registration link I just dropped in the chat. We're going to have Jay and Kyle come and talk to us about the equity study, answer our questions, and then we're going to go through and write our own comments to the Park Authority on what's important to us in the equity study, what our members want to see, and I welcome you to share that link across your networks. So if you want to get involved, I will add my email to the chat. We're always looking for more people to help push for a better park system. So thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Lydia. That's great. And next up will be Dottie Carnes.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much. I facilitate a group, the Fair Parks Initiative, and I want to give a shout out here to Jennifer Grinnell of the LNRC Lawrence Park Friends. She came up with this wonderful logo for the group. Our group is really a network of other friends groups, and that is friends of various Fairfax County Park Authority sites. The list that appears on the slide there shows the friends groups that routinely meet together on Monday evenings at 5 p.m. by Zoom during this time of year when the budget is in play. This is not a sole listing of groups that participate with us. We have other groups, the Friends of Accotink Creek, the Friends of LNRC Lawrence Park, the Friends of Fairfax Archaeology and Cultural Resources, the Friends of Pimmet Barn, who also come online, in particular when we are fashioning communiques, when we're working on statements to be delivered to the Park Authority Board, the Fairfax County Park Authority, or others. And they will come on, they monitor what we're doing as a group. And when we have something that we would like to circulate and be signed, frequently these other groups will also join in and sign. And then we have a third set of groups that remain in monitor mode. Now, I frequently send out emails following our meetings, and our meetings are really network action. You know, if you're the president of a friends group and you're wondering how other friends groups are doing things, how other friends groups are responding to the advertised budget that the county has put forth, and the fact that for years and years and years, and even with the current plus-ups, the Park Authority receives this incredibly low percentage of the county's budget. If you're concerned about that and would like to network with other friends groups about that, the Fair Parks Initiative is for you. This group is a group of presidents and vice presidents of friends groups who get together to discuss our unique perspective on things as friends groups. And we network, we share information, we share reactions that we have to various things, and we share our perspectives on what we think should be happening to best resource the parks that we work so hard on behalf of. And our current focus is on getting positions at the site level, positions at the parks that we work at and for. You know, at Historic Huntley, that's the park where I do most of my work. We don't have a full-time position and never have had since the site opened in 2012, a full-time historian position there. And consequently, the site is only open part of the year. And during the part of the year that's open, it's only open for 1 day a week. And that 1 day, it's only open for a few hours. So we see a need, as do many other groups, for positions at the site level. Green Spring Gardens, they like to do work in their gardens, obviously. They need master gardeners to be there for them in an oversight position. If they had more master gardeners, they could do more things. If they had more people on site at their park, they could do more. Colvin Run Mill also has lost any number of positions in the recent years. This isn't ancient history, it's happening now. Positions are being lost. And now they have a shared position, someone who's working at their site and another site. So we feel it's very important to do everything we can to obtain new money for the Park Authority, to free up other money that they've had sitting there to support positions at our parks. And if you would like to come help with that effort, either actively by meeting with us on Monday evenings and sharing your ideas, or more passively by monitoring what's going on and jumping in and out, maybe as your schedule allows, or just monitoring all the time and seeing what is going on in the budget world, we would welcome you into our fold. I've got my email there at the bottom, toddycarnes@verizon.net, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Toddy. Amy.
Just a quick clarification, the Master Gardeners are actually a volunteer group. What we really need are the professional horticulturalists. Just, it's a niggle, but it makes it clear.
Thank you,
Thank
Amy.
you.
All right, so that is the end of the actual, scheduled agenda. So this is great. We have time to kind of do an around the room so that everybody can share, successes or stories from your specific groups if you would like to do that. Tim, I saw your hand up.
Tim Hackman,
Yep.
Hackman, before we get there, if I may.
Sure.
Jay Cole last night presented a tour de force to the Planning Commission on the Fairfax County Park Authority's portion of the county capital improvement plan, CIP, and covered really what the Park Authority's needs were in terms of cash flow, in terms of bond funding, in terms of the next bond, what's critical, how we need to fund the rec centers that were all built about the same time and are now in desperate need of renovation at great cost. But the other thing is she also clearly focused on the equity issue and the fact that given that a substantial portion of the next bond, and that is probably a good topic for another Federation of Friends meeting. Given the fact that a good portion of the next bond, the 2026 bond, will be have to be dedicated to rec centers and land acquisition and upgrading existing facilities, it doesn't leave a lot left over for new park facilities and things of that nature. So under the public rec open space and access program, we clearly will be, and One Fairfax, we as a board and FCPA staff clearly will be focusing on spending whatever money we have using an equity lens, using an equity focus to try to determine where we can make the most impact in terms of vulnerability areas or number of people who would benefit from our investments. So just wanted to put that out there. There's a lot of material on previous park board meeting recordings. I don't know if the planning commission meeting from last night is recorded and or will be available in the future, but there's a lot of material out there that you can find online, and I encourage you to take a look at that. So thank you.
The planning commission meetings usually are recorded, so I'll add that link in the email I send out with the slides and the video from this meeting tonight as well. So for everybody. All right. Anybody have successes, stories from your friends groups that you would like to share? Yvonne? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Presentation was great. Thank you so much. And it's some very, very encouraging news, you know, moderated with, we still have a huge mountain to climb. So thank you for tonight's information. Things at Frying Pan are going pretty well. I don't know if other friends group have seen it, but we saw a significant drop in our annual appeal fundraiser for this year. I spoke to a couple other not-for-profits and some of them are seeing it. So, you know, that's definitely down a little bit, but we're trying some other things to try to kind of make up that deficit. I had two observations during the talk. One thing, you know, focusing on equity, I'm wondering, are the bus routes that will let people get to our parks without a car included on the web pages for the particular parks? Because I know a lot of new lines were added when the Silver Line opened, and a lot of new bus lines. So, you know, that might be something that would help people who don't have their own personal vehicle get to our parks. And the other thing, you know, I've kind of had this question a couple times on the fundraising side. I go to lots of parks and museums and Goodwill and whatever, and every time I buy something, they ask me if I will round up and make a donation. And, you know, there's an awful lot of people come in and out of the Park Authority and all our different gift shops and things like that. And that's not really an option. So I'm wondering, is there a way to make that work within the system? I know there's limitations within the computer systems, but, you know, that was just an idea that I had that might be some low hanging fruit. But thank you so much for a great presentation. I look forward to getting the email with all the links so I can share it with the rest of the Friends group.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else? James?
Thanks so much. Great presentation. Lots of information to think about. And I just wanted to share with the group here that we had over 900 people participating in the maple syrup boil down. Didn't get as much sap as we hoped for, but we had enough to have an excellent program and to teach people how to make their own maple syrup. So thanks so much.
Excellent. Susan?
Well, I'm not a friends group. We're just a park volunteer team, but most of you will not know that we put up our first osprey nesting platform last fall, and ospreys are beginning to return to the area. The first couple pairs have just been sighted this week. We don't have a taker for our new digs yet, but we're hopeful. Hope I'll be able to report some promising news next time. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Anyone else want to share? Whitney.
Yeah, just Friends of Homes Run is a watershed group, so it's different from a regular Friends group because we don't have a specific park. We often are taking care of the in-between spaces. The stream valleys connect a lot of parks. And I just wanted to mention that one of the things that we've been most active in is trying to do tree rescues. And we've had, literally an explosion of people who are interested in that. So if you don't have tree rescuers at your park, I highly recommend it to help with, that's the Plant Nova Natives and IMA office working together. And so I highly recommend it for the areas around you. You'd be amazed by how many people we keep connecting with. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Everyone's quiet. I'll take that as a sign. Thank you again to everyone for joining us. Thank you to Amy and Mike for speaking to us, and Lydia and Toddy. Thank you all for sharing with each other. That's one of the best parts about these meetings is you all getting the chance to kind of share with each other some things that you're doing, and that's important to support and hear from each other as well. So I will, like I said, I will post the video and the slides, and I will send out that information as soon as we get that posted, probably tomorrow. May not be till Monday, but I'll do it as soon as I can. And we'll have a lot of links for you as well to follow up on the things that we talked about tonight. So thank you very much. Have a good evening and enjoy your weekend.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Allison,
Good evening.
everybody.